Alright. So I missed a day. I was supposed to record yesterday. I got super fucking busy. New college semester has started for me. What's it called? Classes, whatnot. And yeah, I wanted to record a video, I swear. I wrote a whole script and everything. But I couldn't. But anywho, just like I said, I actually ever wrote a script out for this video. Prepared eyes out. Isn't that crazy? Nah, yeah, I bet you guys are surprised because I'm just as surprised. So yeah, this was sort of meant to be like a different type of what if, I guess, a different type of video. Just because, like I said, I'm trying to go through like different routes of doing what ifs now, seeing what I like the most, seeing what you guys might like the most. Other video was like, I forgot how I did it. I did less dialogue and shit. This isn't really meant to go into less dialogue or anything like that, but this is meant to be more scripted out so that it's more detail orientated and just all around like more understandable, because I know like sometimes I'd be all over the place and I realized that I skipped all these cool moments that I probably shouldn't have skipped. So this time I wrote out a bit of script. It'll put me on the right track, that way I can do good by you, and then yeah, you guys can tell me how good I do. Obviously I'm not used to this narrating shit, so I'm probably not gonna be the best when it comes to reading from the script. I'm definitely gonna just retake recordings if I fuck up on lines and shit like that, so you guys don't have to go through it. But my reading voice, obviously I'm not gonna be terrible, like, you know what I mean, I'm not a third grader, but I'm definitely not the best. And you guys can tell me how you feel about it. I've read the script a couple times out loud. Of course I fucked up a lot, but you guys can tell me how I do. If you guys fuck with it, awesome. If you guys don't fuck with it, that's cool too. And also, let me do the YouTuber thing. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment, turn on that notification bell, and enjoy. There you go. After that sellout moment, it's about time I begin, so get ready. Let's go. Class 1A has survived the USJ incident. But now, with All Might having fought the Nomu, One For All is in the weakest state it's ever been in. All Might knows that he needs a successor soon, or the embers of One For All may fade away, with him not far behind. Students have a week after the USJ incident to recoup and come to terms with the attack. Izuku, however, spends his time trying to understand the Omnitrix and what each of the buttons do. Eventually, Izuku would press a certain button that would change the outcome of this story dramatically. Deep in the abyss, someone awoke. In a healing chamber with red eyes glowing, in the darkness, a voice so menacing it would even make the #1 hero hesitate.
The Omnitrix will be mine.
We come back around a week later. Izuku had messed with all the buttons on his watch, though he didn't use his watch over the weekend, instead opting to train due to realizing that when he isn't in his alien form, he's a complete liability to heroes and civilians around him. He decided to start learning to fight. His grandpa would mentor him, but as he did so, Izuku would see glimpses of his grandfather's other nature, his more organized side. He was like some general in an army, but every time Izuku would ask him about it, his grandpa would change the subject, or even worse, harshen the training even more. When the students got back from break, Professor Aizawa would announce the UA Sports Festival and tell all the students about the potential internships and opportunities it could create. While everyone else was pumped about it, Izuku was actually a little more nervous than most. After all, not only was his quirk a unique case, but he also didn't have much control over it at this point. So less agencies were likely to choose him. At least that was his thought process, but he didn't let that deter him from planning to do his best when it came down to it. From here, we skip to the beginning of the sports festival. The crowd's cheers were a deafening howl of excitement as the sports festival started to begin. Izuku would be called up to the stage to give a speech, being the student who had the most points during the entrance exam. He walked up onto the stage and looked out to the crowd. Hello everyone. As I'm sure you all are aware, a little while ago, some of us faced our first true bit of villainy in person. Our school, this sacred place, meant to nurture our spirit and shape us into the heroes of tomorrow, was attacked by heinous monsters who would strike fear into our hearts and tear down that spirit and to make us fear them. But they failed. We persevered and came out there more determined than ever before. So to you all I say, watch us closely, because we are your future protectors. And to the villains who are undoubtedly looking at us from behind the cover of darkness, I hope you watch us as well, so that you can see all of what we have in store for you. There was this silence in the crowd for a few moments, before suddenly there was a roar of applause and cheers showering through the stadium as midnight would call for the first round of the sports festival to begin. Everyone got sent to the beginning of the obstacle course. The first round would be a race to start off the event. Of course, Izuku was a bit nervous at this point. He didn't really have any idea about the speedster hidden away within his watch, so he wasn't sure who'd be the best option to go for. But eventually, he chose to turn into Stinkfly, thinking that a flying alien would be best to avoid the obstacles ahead. Sadly for him, though, the watch had other ideas. With a flash of green light, Izuku would suddenly turn into Diamond Head. Shit. This was bad. Diamond Head was probably the worst alien he could have asked for. Being completely made of minerals had its perks, yeah, but speed and mobility weren't one of them. But luckily for him, Todoroki would freeze the ground, putting everyone to a halt. Izuku would be one of the first ones to break free from the ice. He would use his body shaping abilities in order to sharpen the underside of his feet, making them into sort of ice skates, skating in right behind Todoroki, but his classmates weren't far behind. Before Izuku could worry about that, though, he looked ahead of Todoroki to see those same robots from the entrance exam. He would immediately sharpen the shape of his forearms into blades, as he would use the momentum he had from skating to shoot straight through the robots' bodies, like paper mache. This lead that he had over the pack was short-lived, though, as they would reach the Great Fall area. Izuku knew there was no chance that flimsy rope would hold his weight, in this form at least, so he was forced to make a bridge with his crystal. Though it meant that he could advance fast, it also meant that his opposition could do the very same by following his path. After passing up the Great Fall, Izuku would look ahead to see the minefield. He looked even further ahead to see Bakugo and Todoroki already soaring towards the exit. He knew that if he tried to run, he'd never catch up and be completely left in the dust by those two. Instead, he'd extend his forearms before he started digging into the ground, digging out the mines. After a while, he had a pile, and I mean a huge pile of mines. He took a few steps back before he'd back up and say to himself, "Please don't shatter, please don't shatter, please don't shatter." He would then jump straight into the pile as a thunderous explosion shook the ground, sending everyone nearby onto their feet and making any undug mines blow up. President Micah's voice would cut through the intercom. "Whoa! What was that?" The camera would look around a bit before suddenly they would see this glimmer of light, and then when the camera turns, as the audience would see Deku coming flying in, he would shoot past both Bakugo and Todoroki, barreling ahead of his competition before slamming into the ground of the arena, sending up a cloud of dust. The crowd was silent a while. Before the dust would settle, he'd slowly get up, and as he did so, President Mike would yell out, "Right now, the first person back in the stadium is that man! Izuku Midoriya has made a huge splash!" The crowd once again would roar to life. As the crowd cheered on, Todoroki and Bakugo would enter the arena, second and third place respectively. And while people were running into the arena, Izuku's timer would run out, turning him back to normal. Once everyone was in the arena, the placements were announced. First place, Izuku Midoriya. Second place, Shoto Todoroki. Third place, Katsuki Bakugo, and so on. The next event would then be picked out, a cavalry battle, where points per person were chosen based on how the student ranked for the first round. As Izuku looked up, his eyes wandered to the top of the board. He saw not 5, not 6, but 7 zeros. Izuku Midoriya is now worth 10 million points. Izuku could feel the blood leave his face, and countless eyes now digging into his back. As this would happen, Izuku's red flashing watch would then turn back to its green shade, signaling that it was ready for use. Izuku would start planning to himself, "Okay, if I'm the main target, maybe Stinkfly would be the best. No, I'll probably be disqualified for not being with a partner." He kept mumbling to himself before he'd feel a hand take his shoulder, and when he looked back, he saw a familiar pink-faced girl. "Don't worry, Izuku, I'll join your team." She gave Izuku this foxy grin, as if she knew that they were going to win. Izuku would smile a bit before nodding. "Thank you, Mina. I really appreciate it." As Izuku would talk, suddenly some girl with pink hair would come up behind him. "Ah, there you are, without too many other people on your side. Team up with me, person in first place." Izuku would jump back before asking, Who are you?" She would explain that she's a student from the support course named Mei Hatsume. She'd then explain that she wanted to join up with them for the spotlight, and how her babies would be great use to them. As she was going on, suddenly she'd stop. The Omnitrix would immediately catch her eye as she'd try to reach for it. Izuku would pull his arm back, of course. She'd ask about it, and after a short explanation, she would be a part of the team. Izuku would ask a few more people like Ida and Ochako, but both declined, instead opting to team up with Tokiyami. With that, Izuku's team was now set. Izuku then had to choose what alien fit them best right now. With Mei's gear, they could get away quick. With Mina's acid, they'd have good deterrent for most people to choose. But what alien would help them most here? After a bit of thinking, Izuku would smack his palm down onto his watch before turning into Upgrade. Mei's babies were already super useful, but with the power of Upgrade working in tandem with them, they'd be uncatchable. With the plan now set, the cavalry battle would begin, and immediately everyone was on them trying to grab that 10 million points. But with Mei's tech upgraded, they had no chance. Even when they got close, Mina would shoot acid at them, making them back away from the group. After a while of doing that, people started ignoring them and going for lower numbers, leading to them having a clean victory in the second round. Now Midnight would announce the third round, the versus battles. The bracket would be the same as in canon, so the first round would be Izuku versus Shinso. Izuku would have no clue of Shinso's abilities, only getting a cryptic warning from Ojiro telling him to be careful. Due to that, he would be a bit on edge on how to handle him. But before Izuku could overthink, Shinso would then suddenly cut through the silence. He'd insult Ojiro for forfeiting, mocking him and asking Izuku if he was right. Izuku was pissed and he went to respond, but when he did, his body suddenly stopped as he felt himself lose all control of his muscles. As he stood there, Shinso would begin to explain his quirk out to Izuku, and how now that Izuku was under his control, he was done for. But as he was talking to Izuku wasn't paying attention to that. Instead, he was looking down at his watch that was turning and shifting on its own, before suddenly it would pick out an alien for him. His eyes would hollow out, and his nose would disappear, making his face look more like a skull. What the crowd saw was something that looked spirit-like. Inaudible chatter filled the crowd as Izuku would look down at his body. It's a new alien. Before he could go deeper into thought, he'd stop himself. He decided it's best to take Shinso out of the match so that he couldn't do that mind control thing again. And with that, the first round ends. Izuku would spend a bit of time trying to figure out what this alien was and how it worked, eventually falling on the name Ghost Freak. While that would happen, every other round would likely go like canon, so we'll skip to Izuku versus Todoroki. The arena ringed with excitement. These two were the most anticipated fight of the round. People were hyped up about it for sure, but Izuku on the other hand was a bit more worried. He wasn't sure what alien would be best for the circumstance, but then he'd look up to see that he'd been approached by the number 2 hero Endeavor. Before he could get a word in and ask what the hero was doing here, he'd get cut off. "I don't really know about your quirk, but it seems strong, so make Shoto use his fire." Izuku would be confused as Endeavor would explain how Shoto refuses to use his fire and how this old grudge was holding him back, how he needed to use his fire. Izuku would cut him off this time, telling him that Todoroki isn't him and that he can't control how Todoroki uses his quirk, before he'd then turn his back on the number 2 hero and walk away. After a little while, the two opponents meet in the ring, both prepared for a massive brawl. As the match started, Todoroki would immediately send a glacier of ice at Izuku, not wanting to waste time like with his last round. That way Izuku wouldn't be able to transform and respond. However, just when Todoroki thought the fight was done, steam would start coming off of the glacier, before there was an explosion of fire as Izuku would burst out of the ice with a pillar of fire. Then with a booming voice, Izuku would yell, "Heat Blast!" Maybe yelling out the name after a transformation was a good idea. While Izuku would talk to himself, Todoroki would grit his teeth before throwing another wave of ice at Izuku again. But Izuku would blast his flames back. They'd clash in an explosion of steam. Then Izuku would speak. "Why are you not using your other side still?" Todoroki would respond, telling Izuku how he refuses to use his father's quirk. He would reject that half of himself. Izuku would tighten his fists as the flames around his head would grow taller before he'd ask Todoroki, "You think you'll win the whole festival with half-assed effort?" Todoroki was confused, but he'd have to dodge as Deku threw fireballs at him. But even as he did, more would follow, not hurting him due to his immunity to it, but it was enough to push him back. Izuku would tell him about how everyone was giving it their all, and how right now he was disrespecting everyone else's effort by only putting in half the effort. Then suddenly, he'd tell Todoroki, "Come at me with everything you've got!" As he said that, instead of shooting fireballs at him, he'd instead shoot chunks of debris at him, not letting the temperature be hot enough to warm up Todoroki's cold side. And with Todoroki slowly being chilled, his movements were getting more sluggish than usual, making him get hit by even more debris. And as he was being forced to the edge of the ring, Izuku would ask him, "It's your power, isn't it?" Todoroki stood there in shock a while, before suddenly his left side would burst with heat, the other with cold. Izuku would smile in response before he'd rocket up into the air, flying high into the sky, increasing his heat into something far more powerful. Todoroki would smirk a bit before shooting a massive pillar of ice up at Izuku, chilling the air, making it contract, before suddenly using his heat to make it expand in an unbelievable amount of speed, while Izuku would bring his hands over his head, making a ball of flame so bright it looked like a second sun. Before throwing it down, Cementos would try to block most of the impact with a thick layer of cement, but even with that, the attacks collide, causing a massive explosion. Luckily, the blast was in the air, but it was still strong enough to shake the ground and had enough wind to send Todoroki flying out of the arena. But after that, Izuku would land in the center of the ring on his feet. So the winner of the semifinal round is Izuku. After Bakugo had his fight against Kirishima, there would be a small grace period between matches just like usual. While that happened, All Might was still sitting in the stands, thinking on who he'd want to be his successor. This was the best way to figure out who should be his successor, so surely he'd find who he was looking for. But even after everything he saw, he wasn't sure. Izuku would be a good fit, yes. After all, he's been leading this whole tournament, but still, he didn't know how One For All would react to a transformation quirk, and even then, he wasn't sure if he could trust the boy. After all, his quirk, it was so versatile, it was so many different forms that Izuku didn't even seem used to. It was strange, maybe even related to that man. He wasn't sure though, so he wouldn't just outright call out Izuku. Plus, he knew how dedicated Izuku was as a student. He was Izuku's teacher after all, so he was definitely sure Izuku wasn't working for that man. But before he could delve deeper into that thought, the final round would begin. Izuku and Bakugo would face each other. It had been a long time since they first fought in the hero-villain exercise. Both of them have grown exponentially since then. For the crowd, this was just a fight. But for Izuku and even Bakugo, this held so much more weight than that. They stared each other down a while, and as Izuku reached for his watch, suddenly a loud explosion rang through the whole arena as a blast hit the center stage. It wasn't Bakugo. After all, he was looking right at him. Suddenly, a metallic hand would reach through the smoke and grab at Izuku, but our hero would roll out of the way last second. Once the smoke cleared, he'd look up to see a giant robot along with a huge amount of drones in the air around it. Just as it stood up to its full height, the heroes wouldn't hesitate to get to action. Immediately, there was an evacuation of civilians as the heroes got to work fighting the machines off. As Izuku was about to be attacked again, All Might would suddenly appear between Izuku and the machine, and with a menacing glare he told the beast of a robot, "I don't know who made you, but don't regret ever trying to attack this school." Alright. And that's where we're gonna leave off. This was my first scripted What If. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I definitely enjoyed it. I had fun with it. I think that the story itself is probably went way smoother than 1 or 2. I liked how I did the not the USJ, but the fucking the sports festival. That's the word. I feel like it went way smoother than any of my past What Ifs, because usually I'll just gloss over the USJ a bit. This time I really felt like I told the story as if nobody had ever seen the USJ, which maybe people won't like because like, oh, I know all about the USJ and it basically went the same other than Deku getting further. But I thought it was interesting. If you didn't find that interesting, tell me in the comments, please, so that I can change it. It's definitely a shorter video as well, but guys, I wrote so much. And it was only 20 minutes, or not even 20 minutes, it was 19. The rant is 20 minutes, but I still liked how it went. If you guys found it fun and interesting how I did it, I might redo some what ifs that I feel like could be better with a script, like what if Deku was a Sith Lord or something, I don't know. And I might do more scripts. I probably will actually, because I just really enjoyed that, and I feel like the story is more coherent when I do it like this. But yeah, either way though, tell me how you guys feel. If you guys all hate it, then I'll change my mind, but if you don't hate it, then drop a like. But either way though, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.